Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the hrQ Ideal Roundtable webinar. I'm your host, Sal Vergara, Vice President and Managing Director for hrQ here in Dallas. As you saw, lots of our attendees today are current clients. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, our parent company, Landrum HR, is a nationwide human capital services organization, and we offer full service HR outsourcing or PEO services, worksite management and staffing solutions, and insurance. The hrQ division conducts searches for interim and full-time HR professional placements, ranging from recruiters all the way to CHROs, and we offer comprehensive HR consulting with our deep expertise in talent management and strategy, HR transformation, organizational design, workforce planning and analytics, and HR on call. Now, I started these Ideal Roundtables last year, inspired by the social injustice and unrest we've seen over the last several months. It's meant to be a platform to advance the dialogue and strategy around inclusion, diversity, equity, and authentic leadership. Ideal. I've hosted 6 of these sessions thus far, and I've collaborated with the chief DE&I officers and leaders from the likes of the NBA, Nike, Walmart, PepsiCo, Wayfair, Siemens USA, 7-Eleven, JP Morgan Chase, Novartis, CBRE, the Bill and Melinda Gates Medical Research Institute, and many, many more. Now, as organizations continue to launch or optimize their DE&I strategy, what's become even more clear is the importance of having a solid talent acquisition approach that attracts a diverse culture and really cultivates a sustainable pipeline of that talent. Now, the consumerization of the job seeker, as I call it, continues to evolve, and much like the process of identifying what products they choose to buy, they're also searching for fulfilling roles with companies that have an ideal environment, again, of inclusion, diversity, equity, and authentic leadership. In essence, they're shopping for the right organization to leverage their talent and at the same time flourish in a culture of belonging. We're looking forward to another insightful conversation today. I'm honored to assemble a terrific panel of human beings and practitioners. First off, Jim D'Amico, Global Talent Acquisition Leader at Celanese. Heather Mannings, Director, Diversity and Inclusion Lead and HR Business Partner at Neovia Logistics. Cindy Davis, 2018 SourceCon Grandmaster, Neurodiversity Advocate and Sourcing Leader at Emerald Talent. And last but certainly not least, Sam Dwinell, Chief People Officer at the Mentor Network. In this session, we'll be talking about best practices in talent acquisition to assemble an ideal workforce, what steps should be taken to ensure you attract, nurture, and retain the best talent that will help cultivate a sense of belonging, what technology, if any, should be leveraged, and challenges to expect, I should say, and pitfalls you should be aware of to avoid any sense of unintended divisiveness. So without further delay, good afternoon to everyone. Again, I'm honored and grateful to have you all with me today. For those of you tuning in the audience, if you have any questions or comments, please send those into us via the questions panel, and Monica will help farm those out to us. We want to make sure this is an interactive session. If you have any comments or questions during the course of this webinar, please jump in. Monica is going to put a quick poll on your screen that will give us an idea of where you are in terms of the subject of talent acquisition. So the question here is, have you adjusted or recalibrated your talent acquisition, talent pipelining efforts, given the societal unrest over the past year? So first, yes, we've restructured our entire process. Yes, we're in the midst of reassessing what we've done in the past and establishing a new strategy. No, we'd like to, but we don't know where to start. No, we don't think we need to change anything. So if you take a moment to answer those for us, that would be terrific. Now, as we're tallying the responses, I highly encourage you to connect with us via LinkedIn, any of us here on the screen. Every registrant will receive a link to an on-demand recording of this session. So if you have any questions or you'd like some guidance or support in guiding your team and or IDing strategy, please let me know. We'd certainly be happy to help. So we're getting some responses in here. Again, have you adjusted or recalibrated your talent acquisition, talent pipelining efforts, given the societal unrest over the past year? Lots have changed, and we're assuming lots of strategies have evolved as well. So this will help the panel members identify where the audience is. So let's get after it here. 9%, yes, we've restructured our entire process. 60%, yes, we're in the midst of reassessing what we've done. 23%, no, we'd like to, but we don't know where to start. And only 8%, no, we don't think we need to change anything. So panelists, that kind of gives you an idea of where the audience is. All right, so we're going to get into it. Again, if you're the audience, in the audience, if you have any questions or comments, please shoot that in the questions panel, and Monica will feed that to us. We're going to start off with a foundational question for all the panelists. We're going to go Brady Bunch style. I'll name off the folks. So the first, the foundational question for all the panelists: in this heightened awareness of DE&I, what does talent acquisition mean to you now, and where is it prioritized in the overarching strategy? I'm going to start off with Mr. D'Amico.
Well, thank you, Sal. So for me, what TA means is that we are a driver of business results. So TA exists to increase share and stakeholder value, and how we choose to do that is what defines us. I think with the much more intense focus and scrutiny on DEI and the value that it brings to the company, what we've really been able to show is that diversity and inclusion are the rising tide that lift all ships. So I think for a long time, even though there was tremendous amount of data out there that shows that companies that are diverse represent the communities they serve, that are inclusive, financially outperform their competitors by at least a margin of 3 to 1. For a long time, employees at companies felt that it was a zero-sum game, and that if you were recruiting for diversity, that meant there was less opportunities for those that didn't fall into a diverse category. And I think we've really been able to show that that's not true. And then again, it is that rising tide. So diversity is something that benefits every person that works for us. It benefits our shareholders significantly, and talent acquisition leads with the data that shows that, and is the team, the ambassador that does a lot of the groundwork to showcase to the world that we are diverse, that we are inclusive, that we welcome everybody, and to get that message out there. Sorry, it's probably longer than you want it, so I'll shut up.
No, that's great. That's great. And to underscore what you just said, Jim, organizations like NASDAQ, late last year, they said that they're asking their listed companies to show some semblance of diversity, equity, inclusion strategy. They haven't really said exactly what they are intending to do if you don't show it, but it does offer an example of companies like that, or organizations like that, really looking towards a DE&I strategy and how important it is. How about you, Cindy? What do you think?
Look, I mean, what Jim said, of course, and look, now we have their attention. Now we have, as TA, we have companies' attention. We've been preaching this forever and ever. We've shown the stats to them. They haven't really paid attention, and now we have their attention. And so I think it's a great time to capitalize on that and build the diverse workforce that we want.
Excellent. How about you, Heather?
Yeah, I think that it just gives an even heightened opportunity for our TA professionals to really to drive change, be change agents in this area, if it wasn't already happening in the organization, and really aligning that strategy and just being on the front lines, and really helping managers understand and grow why this is important, and really kind of helping move along that engine.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Sam, what are your thoughts?
I think about what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to create this platform, or this step stool, right, for every person to achieve, right, to their greatest potential. I mean, if you think about that as a step stool, TA is a key leg in that stool, right? You have to have a strong talent acquisition sort of strategy and tactics if you really want to get to this place where everyone has a chance to excel and to grow. But if I think about the last year, it's not the first time there's been intensity around DEI. Right? You could go back a couple of years ago, 2017, with the Me Too movement. This feels a little different and more intense. But I find it interesting. TA to me is a place where leaders often go first when this intensity comes on, because I think it's an easy place to go with a pipeline problem. Go TA, go find me the people, instead of doing the harder work of looking internally at their cultures and their internal decision making. And so while I think TA is an incredibly strong part of that stool, I worry sometimes that we make it the only lever that leaders are really willing to go look at when scrutiny comes off. And we all know you won't be successful if you don't go put all of the other three legs of the stool together too.
Right.
So I think it's a great time for TA to show what we can do and help leaders think differently, but only in partnership with all the other legs of the stool.
Great perspective. Thank you for that. So kind of a good segue into the first question. Let's continue with you, Sam.
Sure.
Given what's happened over the past year and as it relates to the amplification of DE&I, what have you changed in your talent acquisition strategy? And kind of a subset question of that, do you feel those changes, if any, are authentic, or is it a knee-jerk reaction, or maybe even a combo? It's okay if it's even a combo, but just kind of your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. So, the Mentor Network, because most of you will have never have heard of us, is in the healthcare and human services industry. We provide services to people with cognitive and intellectual disabilities, elders in need of support, people recovering from brain injuries. And so if you think about the workforce of an organization like that, we have about 35,000 employees. 25,000 of those are kind of frontline care workers, right? Frontline essential care workers. And, historically, I would say our talent acquisition team has done a really nice job of delivering a diverse set of hires. It's somewhat in our DNA, particularly our largest business is supporting people with cognitive and intellectual disabilities. And so it's a bit in our DNA to think about these things. And so, historically, you can look at it and say, okay, we've hired 75% women, nearly 50% people of color, which is pretty good even for healthcare industry. But, like many of you, our senior leadership doesn't necessarily reflect our workforce. At least not in the way that myself and our CEO and our executive team would like it to. And so that's where I'd say over the last year, and in fairness, I joined the organization in August, so I can talk for the last 8 months. For the last 8 months, our focus has been there. And this isn't going to sound like glamorous if someone's looking for like the magic pill. We went back to the basics. And what I mean by that is, we went back and pulled apart our jobs and said, what really are the core capabilities and experiences that people need? If you want somebody who's been there and done that in our talent pool, they're predominantly white and male, right? And so we went back to the basics and said, yeah, but what are the core competencies? What other experiences could people have had that would help them be successful in these kind of roles and get away from checking these 19 boxes to really, what are the 5 things that would really demonstrate that somebody could be successful? We had to hold our search partners accountable. Everybody says they do that. Everybody writes it into their contracts now. You could do some little things. Like with our most recent ones, I've just told our partners, I'm not talking to anybody until I have at least 2 diverse candidates in the pool. Now, no search person wants to work up some candidates that you refuse to talk to, right? And so it's just a simple thing. But it helps. And then we've done work on diverse interview teams, right? Again, none of these are things that are new or shiny, but if you go to the basics and you do them well, right, and you do them consistently, right, you can see progress. And if I just look at the executive hires we've done since I've been there, it's almost 60% women, over a third people from underrepresented backgrounds. So you can get there. But it is some of these core basics that you just have to have discipline around for us. And I don't see that changing. I mean, the beauty of saying you're going to these are the core things is they're not a flavor of the month that might just go away, at least for us.
That's great perspective. Thank you very much for that. And you've obviously seen quite a bit in the compressed amount of time that you've been there. So interesting to get your thoughts. Let's kind of continue down that path of strategy. Jim, what's the biggest challenge in adjusting your talent acquisition strategy to really ensure you create and foster an ideal culture? It's great you talk about it, but what are you actually doing? And again, a kind of a subset question that, do you feel these efforts are creating a sense of unintended divisiveness? And the reason why I bring that up, on my past panels, some of the efforts had this unintended result of people felt even more isolated because of ERGs and employer resource groups and as such, which we'll get into just a little bit with another question. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So I think we're very lucky at Celanese that, starting actually about 7 or 8 years ago, the hard work was done on creating a very inclusive and supportive culture. And that was very deliberate that be done first, because there's no sense in saying we're diverse if we're not inclusive first, because I think Sam had made the point before, if you're just bringing people in, if it rolls down to TA and you're not looking internally at your culture, it's going to fail. So I think that's been, very critical for us. I think what's interesting is that we have done a lot over the past year to make sure that we're building authenticity into our processes. So we've worked with a Hollywood screenwriter for some time on with our teams in learning how to tell authentic stories. So we're not just reading the company line. People are talking about authentic stories about how diversity and inclusion has impacted them at Celanese. We're doing more video because, that's how people learn now. And we're using authentic video, not polished, produced video that our employees are shooting on their cell phones to be more authentic. And that's probably, as we've done the strategy, that may have been the biggest disconnect is, and that's really on me. Like, I think, hey, I can do a video on my cell phone, so I think everybody can do that. And you know what? I forget, not everybody is comfortable with that. So that was a stumble I made out of the gate that I think initially really ran the risk of isolating, some of our, particularly like our more seasoned and, less technically adept employees. But we've worked really hard to reach them where they want to be reached, how they want to be reached, to give them the support to do that. So I think that's probably the best way I can answer that for you, Sal.
That's great, and it's examples like that within Celanese that companies should take a look at and try to replicate. I want to touch upon an often overlooked segment in diversity recruiting. And Cindy, this is for you. Why should companies establish a strategy to accommodate the neurodiverse? And all of us here at the panel know what neurodiversity means, but for those in the audience, can you help explain and define neurodiversity so that they have some context to what the answer is?
Okay. Yeah. So neurodiversity is basically, think of it as people who don't think like your average person. So on the neurodiversity spectrum, you have people with ADHD, autism, dyslexic, things like that. The thinking process, not wrong, just different. And so they think differently. Because I was diagnosed with autism about 15 years ago, we think differently about things, and why you should include that in your strategy. And I'll talk about, it's really difficult to do that, but why you should include it in your strategy is because we do tend to be outside the box thinkers. We're very loyal. We can be very focused. For example, for me, I see things in patterns. I can look at code. I'm not a software developer, but I can look at code and I can tell you what's wrong with it. Not that I can compile it or anything, but I can tell you why it's not going to run. I can look at processes and I can see where we can make improvements, things like that. So there are a lot of things that we can bring to the table. In fact, Chase Bank did, a few years ago, Chase Bank hired a group of neurodiverse individuals and put them in jobs alongside the neurotypical individuals. 48%, they showed an increase in productivity of 48% over a 6-month period. And by the end of that 6 months, they were doing the work that people who had been in the job 3 years were just figuring out. Also, in addition to learning how to do the work, they had an increase in productivity of 50%, more than 50% over what their neurotypical peers were doing. So it's very important to include them. Now, how do you include them? That's tough, because how do you identify people? I don't put don't go around saying, "Hi, I'm autistic." We don't wear signs or anything like that. There's nothing that can really, there are no identifiers like that. And in fact, a lot of the people who are neurodiverse are not even diagnosed. So I think what you have to do is you have to be more inclusive in your recruiting program overall, make your application process easier. When you're, I hate screening for cultural fit, because you're going to rule out people who don't have a firm handshake, who don't look you directly in the eye. This is going to rule out the kind of people that you really want. There are some accommodations during the process. And again, it's just the best way to do it that I can see is unless you have a designated program for neurodiverse people, just making the whole overall recruitment process more kinder, gentler, and less, in your face and stress inducing.
And we're talking about also the application process, right? Because some folks have an inability, or even for folks that have an affliction with their sight, if they're blind, interview process, application process. So just a quick question on that. Have you personally seen the needle move on this, or is this still something companies are still a bit reluctant to tackle? Because it does take some investment in, I think, empathy too. Because if you're not empathetic to what the plight is of that candidate, it's kind of hard to develop a policy.
I've seen some companies have dedicated programs. Again, that doesn't impact most of the population because most of the population isn't diagnosed. And so I've seen some companies like Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, SAP, they have dedicated programs like software testing programs, Chase Bank, like I mentioned. But no, I'm pretty disappointed in the big tech companies, to be honest. I mean, their interview process is still one size fits all, and if you don't fit into their mold, then you don't make it through their interview process. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there.
Yep. Even from a recruitment marketing perspective, how do you market to those folks, and how do you make them feel comfortable of applying or thinking that, XYZ company welcomes and embraces me, who might be autistic or may have Downs? I mean, there's a lot of smart people who are afflicted with those the circumstances. And I think for companies that you should start thinking about that, because I really feel like, and I think the panel agrees with me here, that you're missing out on a lot of great talent because you're just not conveying to them that from an employer brand that you're open to them. And once you do that, be ready to be able to accommodate them. And it might be a helpful way to start hiring those folks, and then getting them, maybe even create a group that allows you or allows them to give you tips and tricks and suggestions of what would accommodate them and make them feel more comfortable.
So the start is with job descriptions. Like, do you really need 20 requirements on your job? I mean, this goes for women too. Most women aren't going to apply for a job unless they meet most of the criteria. And, but the same for, people on the spectrum, I guess, or other people who are neurodiverse. Make the qualifications clear and direct, and don't overload it. 3 to 5 qualifications for a job is plenty. Be a little more open-minded about what you're looking for. So that's one way. Having a website that's clear and has, and to the point, very direct kind of communication. I personally, don't do innuendos well, or when people try to drop hints on me, I lose it. I don't, don't try that with me, because it's just going to go over my head. You have to be pretty direct. So things like that. There is technology available that you can integrate into your website. There's a company in England, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, but there's technology that you can integrate into your career site, which it's like a button, and they can push that and choose different things regarding the color of the website. Like some people have sensory issues towards bright light. And so they can have a black background on the page and a more calm, softer font. dyslexic. There's certain fonts that people with dyslexia can read better. There's different things like that. So there is adaptive technology that you can integrate into your website to assist people with the application process. And then once you get through the application process, just the same thing, clear directions, doing what you're saying. If you're going to follow up with somebody in 10 days, follow up in 10 days. In the interview process, have them interview with people who are like them. And this isn't just for the neurodiverse, this is for anybody. If you've got a panel, if you're interviewing a software engineer and there's a panel of 5 white males and you're a female, you know, from an underrepresented minority, I don't think you're going to feel too comfortable in that situation. So things like that. And then just, you know, I mean, those are ways. And then once you come on board, of course, there are other ways as well.
Sure.
Accommodation is not difficult, especially with the work from home thing. You know, it's pretty easy to accommodate people who are on the spectrum.
There are some subtle nuances and some not so subtle nuances that we all need to accommodate and make some changes. So
well, and if you talk to one person we're all different. You know, it's a spectrum. So, you know, I mean, what works for one person doesn't work for another.
Absolutely. And the point I just wanted to underscore one last thing that Brett Kierstead, our Chief Revenue Officer, likes to say, and that's always stuck with me. Don't let perfect get in the way of really, really, really good. You know, I think if we all strive for perfect, we're never going to get there. So to your point on the experience and some of the things that you're kind of looking for, that purple squirrel that sourcers like to talk about, it's hard. So thank you very much for that. And I think it's very educational for a lot of folks who have not thought about the neurodiverse. So thank you for that. Heather, are you leveraging, and you and I have talked about this privately, are you leveraging employee resource groups or even involved in community involvement to build specific talent pipelines? You know, a lot of companies are going to high schools and junior highs and kind of starting early to try to change the ideas and the expectations and the aspirations of young folks who might not necessarily think about going to school or going through to a particular or pursuing a particular career. So are you guys doing that there at Neovia?
Well, you know, our challenge at Neovia is we are in the very, very early stages of building out our program. So for those of you, pardon me, that are watching, that you know, are listening to some of this and feeling like, how do we get there? You know, we're in the same place, right? So we've built, we do not have ERGs yet. They are a part of our strategy, but we're not ready for that yet. But that doesn't mean that we're not able to still do community outreach. And so, you know, some of the things that are in our plans to do, or even that I've done in other organizations, are reaching out to local colleges. So at an organization, we did a mock interview program. So we brought leaders in and we built relationships with a local college. And so it was a great benefit to our leaders. You know, quite honestly, some of them could use some experience interviewing as well. And so it was a great opportunity for them to build some relationships and for us to build relationships with that college and their placement offices who place all different types of candidates, new graduates, as well as returning, you know, students who are alumni, right? People are alumni. So that's a great way to build relationships. You can always reach out to the MBA societies. Every town has got, every city's got MBA societies for all different groups, and they will be thankful for you to reach out to them and say, hey, we're building our program, but we're not quite there, and how can we partner together? So another really great way to do that. I happen to have a daughter on the spectrum. She's, although not on the autism spectrum, not of working age yet, but you can absolutely reach out to, in the Dallas area, there are so many great organizations that are teaching and placing students, and they're looking for companies that are looking for people who are 18 to 26 to start them in job opportunities, and they'll shadow with you and do all kinds of great things and really help build the program around what you're looking for. So you don't have to be in a mature state to be able to really start building out your pipeline and building relationships. So get out there and talk to people. The other thing that you can do is you can ask your employees. If you have some people who raise their hands and want to be involved and want to help, if somebody were to come to me, I could tell you about neurodiversity and where to find those connections. And then even when we bring people in, there's lots of parents and siblings and of people who can help set up how we make that group of people successful in our organization. So your own employees, I'm sure, have all types of connections in all different types of areas, in their own diverse areas that could help, and they want to see change right in your organization. So why not be able to help utilize them? As some of the other very wise panelists have said as well, there is just this huge education piece that has to happen with our leaders, because we can put awesome slates in front of them, but if they're still challenged with thinking, with accepting, with understanding, then we've got TA people who are working really, really hard and not being met halfway. So there's a whole bunch of education that's got to go along with all of this for it to really advance. Because, I heard someone say a couple of days ago at something I was listening to, is that diversity doesn't mean not qualified. And so many times people put those two together. And so there's a lot of changes that have to happen with the way that we're thinking as we're beginning to build out those pipelines and put those slates in front of our leaders.
In the spirit of kind of continuing what you're talking about, Heather, a question came in that you kind of addressed this, and this at this point is open to all the panelists. The question is, there's a lot of talk about internal processes around DE&I, but what investments are these companies making in the community, and you kind of addressed that, to foster a more diverse candidate pool? So for any of you, just want to jump in, what are your respective companies doing to do that? Again, I mentioned earlier some companies that I've talked to are going as early as junior highs to kind of create that. Anyone else?
Yeah,
I'll jump in.
So I think we share a mutual friend in Craig Fisher, who's with NAC IO now, and we just recently participated. They did a hackathon event for high school students and college students, and so we were able to participate in that. And I think that that's really important. Oftentimes when you're young, you don't know what your options are, right? And if you were like me, we didn't have a lot of support in high school. I mean, my guidance counselor told me the best I could hope for was parolee. So that wasn't a lot of good guidance for my future. So, being able to start talking to people at a much younger age and demystifying for them not just what the jobs are, but what a career path looks like. So how you grow from that. They drink it up. They really want to hear that. And I think, God, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was young. So
yeah, I would have given anything for that.
Yes. And that also not only applies to going back to internships in high schools and junior highs, but also with even former military and former athletes. I volunteer for an organization that caters to former military and former athletes. And sometimes they have this myopic view of where their career is supposed to go post-military, post-athletic life. Yeah. And that's the same vein of making sure that they open their eyes that there is so much opportunity out there. They're not just directed to, a handful of careers already preset for them. So hopefully that answers the question there. Cindy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, sure. When I was at Uber, we were very involved with hiring former athletes. I interviewed several former NFL football players for recruiter positions, sourcing and recruiting positions, and we'd bring them in and train them and to be sourcers and recruiters. And that we had three that were just phenomenal. I mean, incredible.
And that's probably not a career that they had thought that yeah,
no,
they would have never thought that. So
I mean, surely not. I never thought. Did you ever think you were going to be a recruiter? I didn't.
No, not at all.
I don't think anybody plans that career.
I thought I was going to be an NFL running back, but that didn't happen, obviously, for obvious reasons. But so real quickly, since when I have a diverse group here of HR leaders and talent acquisition professionals, and before I'm going to preface this with, I always say that we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So this topic in and of itself, it's a necessary conversation. So how do you mitigate or eliminate the need for some folks to feel like they need to code switch? And for those of you in the audience who don't know what code switching means, you probably do, you just don't know the term associated with it. Code switching is the act of changing our behaviors, including the way we talk, the way we dress, our mannerisms, to conform to a different cultural norm than what we might authentically do in our own homes. So people dressing to meet the corporate culture. And I know that there has to be some semblance of formality and business, but we're seeing that often a lot impact people of color, and they feel the need to change the way they look and talk. And so this is a topic that I had with a couple of my partners on our podcast talking about code switching. And those of you that know, Randy Wilson was our guest in that particular conversation. So I'm curious from your perspective, especially from, again, HR leaders and also talent acquisition folks, as you were interviewing them, how do you do to eliminate that? Or is that still just part of business today, unfortunately? Well,
being on the autism spectrum, I code switch like 100% of the time around other people, because to be understood, you have to somewhat mask your behavior to fit in and to be understood, and not, it's not comfortable, but it's the way of the world, I guess.
But that's something that, do we all agree that's something that we want to say probably we should change, right? We should start to not make you feel that way. And then Sam, from your perspective as a chief people officer, you don't necessarily, I think, I don't know, but don't know if you do a whole lot of interviewing, but from a culture perspective, I should say, how do you make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about code switching, right, as this sort of reading the lay of the land around you and modifying your behavior to fit in, right? Actually, we all do that, right? Some groups disproportionately, and it's exhausting. Like Cindy, it's probably exhausting for you, right? And so you've got to go at the root of that, which is creating an environment where people actually can be themselves and can know that feeling a little different or having a different perspective is okay. Now, if I think about that at an enterprise level, like even I get overwhelmed trying to think about how do you make a whole company shift that way. So just start with your own team, is what I'd tell everyone here, right? Start within your own teams, and particularly in HR and TA, we should be modeling the way on a lot of these behaviors. And I don't know that we always are, at least not every team I've been a part of. And it can be some simple things to create this tone where it's okay to be yourself. And so here's an example. We start every one of my leadership team, right? So our HR leadership team meeting that we have, and we do this 2 words exercise, right? 2 words about how you're feeling that day, right? And in the beginning, when I started it, people kind of looked at me awkward, and everyone had happy words. Everyone was like, I feel excited about a new leader. And but over time, that people realize that it's okay to be genuine. It's okay to say, you know what, like somebody yesterday was like, I'm just full. I'm full of all the crap in the world. I'm full. I can't take any more today, right? If people start to realize you can talk that way, right, and that it's a safe, it takes us 10 minutes, and then we dive into whatever, but it builds a tone, right? And so if more leaders would just do that, take a few minutes to just let people share who they are and what they're dealing with, you see that build over time. But again, that's a microcosm of one team. At the enterprise level, you've got to build that kind of mental model into all of your different people processes, right? Which is a journey, but I think a lot of companies
Sure.
have made some good progress over the last, couple of years.
And it really
Yeah,
starts by
about
acknowledging it, right? Guys, it's you to acknowledge that it exists. And it's okay. You could convey that it's okay to feel okay or be yourself, but also at the same time, when you receive that authenticity, there can't be this look on your face of why are you acting like that. So there has to be a two-way, bi-directional kind of thing. So Heather, I apologize, I interrupted.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry. Yeah, it was. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like there's safety and security. So in order for you to be able to be who you really are, and as we've been talking about for years, like bringing your authentic self to work, or to wherever you are, there's got to be a level of trust. There has to be psychological safety. And so in organizations where there's not an environment of that, surrounding anything, but especially surrounding DEI, that has to start happening. And I think Sam is right. Like when you think about it in the big picture, in the large organization, wow, that seems overwhelming. Even if you started in teams and you start working your way up, but it has to be larger than that.
I'm sorry, we're getting an echo there. Go ahead. Thank you, Heather, for that. You said psychological safety, which is something that I think that we all tend to forget to convey and espouse. So thank you for that. Jim, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think it's also incumbent when you are in an environment where you see that somebody is making that not all right, that somebody is making somebody uncomfortable. And this is not, and I don't care what your role is at a company, you are a leader. Everybody leads by example. And so we also have to know that we have to work with our peers, the people around us. And if you see somebody that is not allowing somebody to be authentic or is making somebody uncomfortable, that we also have the strength internally to say, hey, that's not all right. Doesn't mean you dress them down in public. Maybe you pull them aside. But, we have to understand the concept of code switching has been around forever, but for a lot of people, it's a very new idea. There's a lot of changes happened in the last year that's creating a lot of awareness, but it's not caught up with everybody. So sometimes, sometimes as leaders, sometimes we have to be strong enough to call out when we see something wrong.
Absolutely. We all have to advocate for each other.
Exactly.
Quick question from the audience. Our company just completed the 21-day Race Diversity Challenge, followed the United Way outline. As a result, a takeaway from the challenge was to create a DE&I committee. And they also mentioned wanting to be part of recruitment. I'm curious on the panelists' opinion on whether to include employees, non-HR related nor management in these processes. From the past panelists, the past panels, I know the answer, but what are your thoughts?
Every employee is a recruiter. Every employee is a recruiter.
Right. Absolutely.
I think that's the basic gist, is that you have to have representation from everyone. And just by virtue of the word diversity, you have to have your employees. So it's a great question, but I think people are often a little bit perplexed as to what the right path is. So as you can all see, the panelists, their reaction, yes, the answer is yes, that it should be everyone. And also, some past panelists have also mentioned that the unintended divisiveness that occurred after creating these ERGs, what they have recalibrated their approaches, they have one for LGBTQ, or for the neurodiverse, or for Black folks, or people of color, Latinx, etc. They have those so that there's a platform for them to feel comfortable to convey their concerns, their fears, their thoughts. But they also invite everyone else to include themselves in the conversation. So although it's a group specifically for that URM or underrepresented minority or that specific community, it's the invitation is to everyone. And that really allows everyone to kind of join in, and so they can hear what your Black colleagues, what their thoughts are. And a lot of it's aha moments, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were going through that. And so that's one of the basic common denominators that all the panelists, you see everyone shaking their heads in agreement, have those ERGs, but make sure you invite everyone. So that way it's a platform for those people that you specified, but you also allow others to hear and feel and get really learn empathy of what these other folks are going through, what their colleagues are going through. I want to be mindful of time. I know it's right after lunch.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Sam.
I was just gonna build on that quickly, Sal. Not necessarily my current organization, but previously I was at Texas Instruments for many years, had a wide ERG presence, and they did an amazing job, phenomenal at requiring them to partner together. So they would do things. So TI is unusual in that they had religious ERGs many, many years ago and have for a while. But the Christian Values Initiative, the Muslim Initiative, the Jewish, they did joint events, right? To show, because they face similar challenges of how do I bring my faith to the workplace? Their faith was different, but their challenge was similar. Same thing with the TI Pride, the LGBT organization, partnering with the Christian Values to do programming and events. So if you can encourage that partnership, you get that understanding, but you also really do eliminate that divisiveness, and you actually send the message you want, which is we're all here together, right, for a common purpose.
Absolutely.
I thought it was really powerful the way they managed it there.
That's a great example for those, again, to hear what companies like TI are doing. A quick question from my friend Carly. What actions are the panelists taking to engage hiring managers in changes to the hiring process and engaging them in the drive to hire more diverse challenge? I found that we can have a TA bought in and working hard to bring diverse candidates, yet when it passes to the hiring manager, that is often where the efforts fall down. So it seems like everybody kind of has experienced that or sees that. Anyone want to tackle that one?
One of the things that we've seen, Sal, is that when we know that we look at our data, right? And the top of our funnel really reflects the outcomes of our funnel, right? So in order to make sure that we have diversity throughout that hiring process, what we know is it'll probably triple your time to fill. If we want to be very deliberate, make sure we're really doing all the attraction and the processes. So that's hard for our hiring managers to swallow, right? When they have an opening, it's an acute need. They need somebody now. And when you come and say, well, guess what? It's going to take 2 to 3 times longer to fill your position. But what's been really great is that we have been transparent about that all the way through executive leadership of the board. And so we get a lot of air cover on that. And the business understands that trading time for quality is something we will do all day, that quality is what's king. And so we've really changed the way we think about hiring internally, about it being a race to close a position to being more of a marathon that results in very good quality of hire. And kudos to every leader here that's helped us support that and really made that possible for us in TA, so we don't feel the time to fill crunch all the time.
That's a lot of undue pressure and unnecessary pressure to not get it right. I've got 2 really hot questions that I want to ask, and I want to make sure we have time to address them. One is with technology, so I'll ask that real quickly. My background is, I think some of you in the audience may know, I come from a recruitment marketing and candidate-centric CRM background. Obviously, lots has changed since I stopped doing that 4 years ago. So has anyone in the panel have invested in any new technology to help in increasing diversity hiring? I'm sure the audience wants to hear what things are out there. Just to be clear, we're not endorsing any particular company that they're mentioning, but I just want to make sure that they get their fair due in being conveyed, that they're out there, that there's a lot of great technology out there to help in diversity hiring. So I'll open it up to the panel there if anyone has implemented anything specifically for that.
So I can't remember names of anything. but there is technology similar to Textio and Grammarly. In fact, I think there are some functions in Grammarly that will read the tone of your messaging and make it more appropriate to your audience. So that's one thing. And then I mentioned earlier, there's technology that you can put on top of your career site, and it works. I know it works with it integrates with all kinds of ATSs and things that it gives the reader control over the screen and as the appearance of the screen and things like that. So there's that technology as well.
Awesome. And let me get on and now that you bring it up, Cindy, let me get on my TA soapbox real quick. For those that in the audience that haven't done a career site audit, like go in there as if you're a candidate to see what that experience is like. I see throughout my career, and I used to do that for my previous companies, was do career site audits, just kind of figure out how long does it take for someone to actually apply. So, and not only from an application process, but also like we're talking about here today, what is that message of conveying an ideal culture within your organization? Mm-hmm. So if you've not done it as an org, I would highly encourage you guys to take a moment this afternoon and act like you're Joe Nobody applying for a job and see how long it takes or see how short it takes. That there might be opportunities for you to optimize that. This other question. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, it can be hugely frustrating when it asks you to upload a resume and then asks you to type in everything. Things like that. That I'd walk away from that.
Right. Well, here's one question that it just popped up, and I'd be remiss not to mention it because it's happening in my own community where I live. There's opposition to DE&I curriculum and training where I live, with lots of parents and community members saying there isn't a diversity problem and that DE&I programs inherently create the problem, and it's just made up. It's a facade to placate the media, and so there is this dichotomy of people who are endorsing it and really embrace the idea of that. And there's that other side who says, there's not a diversity problem. In fact, if you do a curriculum, it's going to cause a problem. Again, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's an uncomfortable question for some. Jim, you're shaking your head.
Well,
who wants to tackle that question?
That's a great test of privilege, right? If you are privileged, then there's no problem, right? Because you don't feel a problem. So you have to be empathetic and you have to listen. And if somebody is telling you there's a problem, you have to believe them. And again, I think for too long, there have been groups or individuals or whatever you want to say that frame diversity as a zero-sum game where, there's only so much of a pie. And if you take a piece of it away, you don't get that piece of the pie. And that's bull crap, excuse my language, because what we know is that an inclusive environment where everybody has opportunities to succeed and grow, it's not about taking away a piece of a pie. It's about all of us sharing a bigger pie. And I think that people fear the zero-sum game aspect and don't understand the opportunity. So I think that's where we all have an opportunity to change people's hearts and minds around that. But look, if you think that diversity education is the problem, then that is, you just pass the privilege test with flying colors.
That is part of the problem. And I see and read a lot of comments where that is kind of prevalent and rampant, and that it will cause a diversity issue. So it's unfortunate, but and we may never change their minds, right?
No, if it causes a diversity issue, it was always there. It just festering,
Right.
That's right. We just were covering it up. We were just going to play the let's pretend game. Is what we're going to do.
Right.
And oftentimes the comment, the follow-up comment is, well, it's not my problem. It doesn't impact me, so it's not my problem. And unfortunately, that's just kind of reality. This webinar is not meant to disparage folks who think that way, but it is in the vein or in the spirit of DE&I. It does pose the challenge for us, for all of us here who advocate for a more diverse equitable and inclusive environment, that we may never change minds. But one of the common themes, and I keep bringing back themes from the former panelists, is that no matter what, you're going to have the haters. You're going to have people who will provide obstacles and challenges. For those of you in the audience who are in the midst of reorganizing or reoptimizing your DE&I strategy along with your talent acquisition strategy, just keep going. At least you're doing something, and don't feel this despair of, oh my gosh, Sam at TI is so far along, or Celanese has this great thing, or Heather is in the midst of already kind of developing this robust strategy. It's okay. The basic message is just to start. Don't worry about anybody else. Just keep going. So I'm going to end with this last question. We've got a few minutes left. What is the best practice you've implemented that has worked so well? And I'm going to pick on you, Heather. I know that you're new and you're continuing to kind of build this out, but has there been something thus far that you think, wow, that really is great, I should continue that?
Well, and it wasn't surrounding TA, but the best thing that we did was we listened to people. We asked our organization, for volunteers to come and talk to us about what they were thinking and what our program should look like, and how can we be more inclusive. And we had a bunch of people that volunteered that were willing to share with us all kinds of things. And really what they said was, thank you for asking and thank you for listening. And so it's something that we've added into our strategy to happen pretty regularly, because it's extremely important. There's no way that I can know everything sitting in an office. Talking to the organization is just a huge thing, and keeping the conversation going.
Yep. And you know what? Kudos to Heather. She and I have talked over the past few months, and she's been steadfast in what she does. And there's been a little bit of trepidation. Of course, that's a big job to do. But she's done a fantastic job of, as with everyone on the panel, but just knowing her story of kind of getting into this role. It's hard. And it's, as Sam and Cindy and Jim can attest to, this thing is hard to address. So any other best practices? It doesn't necessarily have to be with TA, but, if it is, great. But, in the realm of DE&I.
The simplest thing you can do right now, and y'all are going to laugh at me, but the simplest thing you can do right now in TA is to take words like ninja, rock star, all those kind of things out of your job descriptions. I mean, that costs you no money. Write a respectful job description. Don't try to play up to the boys. You know what I'm saying? I mean, make it more inclusive. That doesn't cost you anything. So what I'm trying to say is audit your job descriptions, your job ads, make sure that they're friendly and they're inviting to everybody, not just
rainmakers, right?
Not just rainmakers.
I see that.
Yes, thank you.
I see that a lot. That in and of itself, we could have a whole webinar on just job descriptions and how that impacts talent acquisition just in general. So, Jim, anything at Celanese that?
Yeah, and this is broader in TA in general, but it really helps with all of our diversity. Listen, if you're in TA, stop looking and reviewing candidates with an eye towards exclusion. Always look for inclusion. Don't tell me why somebody can't do the job. Tell me why they can. So that's a big mindset change.
Very good. I mean, good point, and kind of underscores why we call it ideal with inclusion first. I refer to ID&E because we got to get the mindset that inclusion first versus diversity. Sam, we'll kind of wrap this up with you. Any best practices within your role that you feel like is worth sharing?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's about human connection for everybody that comes into your organization, whether or not they feel like they're getting that, whatever that means for them, right, in your team. And so, again, it sounds really basic, but going back to basics of helping managers build relationships and trust with their team. Right? Where do things go awry? It's over bad performance conversations. It's over how somebody thinks about selecting someone for a role, right? And it really is going back to helping leaders build individual connections with people, right? Creates an environment where everybody can be successful. And I think sometimes we try to automate away and process away the fact that it's about a person-to-person connection. And we should encourage and trust and build that in our leaders instead of trying to take it away from them.
Yep. Basic foundation element to success there. No better words spoken there. Well, listen, it's been an absolute honor and has proved to be both educational and inspiring to have all of you. Again, audience members, please connect with us on LinkedIn. On behalf of hrQ, Landrum HR, and the audience panel members, thank you for spending your afternoon with us. I know you guys are busy, and we appreciate your continued efforts in the advancement of an ideal culture. Thank you so much. Audience, please take a quick moment to answer the survey as you exit the webinar. This helps us figure out what future topics you want to hear and what formats you like. I'm continuing to build out future roundtables like this. The ideal roundtables will continue throughout the year. Stay tuned for more details on upcoming sessions. We do these to instill the right mindset, create a sustainable strategy, and show by doing so that others can replicate. So on behalf of hrQ, Landrum HR, I'm Sal Vergara. Until next time, elevate yourself and those around you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.